Welcome back to the deep dive. In part one, we saw the incredible rise of ancient Egypt, the old kingdom, the pyramids, but we left it in pieces, really, shattered by climate change and famine.
It was a complete ideological collapse. I mean, the whole system broke down. The pharaoh was supposed to guarantee cosmic order, Mot.
And when the Nile doesn't flood and people are starving.
Exactly. That promise is broken. The entire concept of the divine king was fundamentally questioned. The country just splintered into these little warring fiefdoms.
And that sets the stage for what we're talking about today, one of history's greatest comebacks. We're moving from that fragility into an era of, well, true Golden Age power.
That's the perfect way to put it. The story of ancient Egypt is a story of resilience. They put themselves back together 3 times over 3,000 years.
Wow.
But this recovery, the one that leads to the new kingdom, it's different. It was forged in the fire of a foreign invasion, and it created something entirely new, an unstoppable military state.
The new kingdom. This is the Egypt everyone imagines, right? The colossal temples, the famous names that, everyone knows.
Precisely. This is the Pete. The 18th and 19th dynasties, we're talking about their greatest territorial reach, unimaginable wealth, and just incredible cultural sophistication.
And the people, the cast of characters ruling in this, 200-year span, it's just staggering.
It's an absolutely explosive period of ambition and genius. You have Hatshepsut, a woman who rules as a male king.
Right.
Then you have Thutmose III, the Napoleon of Egypt.
A military genius.
Followed by Akhenaten, the heretic who tried to erase 1,000 gods for just one. And of course, Tutankhamun, the boy king.
Whose tomb showed us what all that wealth actually looked like.
And finally, Ramesses the Great. The ultimate builder, the ultimate warrior, the man who defined what it meant to be pharaoh for 66 years.
That is an epic lineup. Okay, so let's start with the first comeback. How did Egypt stabilize after that initial collapse? Let's get into the Middle Kingdom.
So around 2055 BC, things start to pull back together. This is the beginning of the Middle Kingdom. The unifier was a prince from the south, from Thebes, a man named Mentuhotep II.
And this wasn't an easy process, I take it.
Oh no, it was a long, hard slog. It took him decades to crush his rivals and bring the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, back under one ruler.
So Thebes, which was just a provincial town when they were building the pyramids in the north, suddenly becomes the new center of the universe.
It's a huge shift, and a permanent one. The political and religious heart of the country moves south. Thebes becomes the site of Karnak and Luxor, and its local god, Amun, becomes the supreme state god.
When you think of the Old Kingdom pharaohs, you think of the pyramids, these huge, almost abstractly divine projects. What's the philosophical difference now for these Middle Kingdom rulers?
It's a profound difference. They just lived through this societal breakdown, this trauma,
Right.
and it taught them a brutal lesson. If the state can't feed its people, the divinity of the king means nothing. So they became incredibly pragmatic.
So it wasn't about building for eternity so much as building for right now.
Exactly. Their focus shifted from the eternal the spirit, to the earthly well-being of their people. They were still building temples, of course, but their major projects were all about infrastructure.
Practical governance.
Immensely practical. They wanted to stabilize the food supply, protect their assets.
So what were some of these projects?
The most famous is the development of the Fayum Oasis. It was a massive feat of hydraulic engineering. They channeled the Nile's floodwaters, they drained parts of a lake, used sluice gates and canals.
To create more farmland?
To create huge tracts of new, fertile land. It was a visible, tangible demonstration of the pharaoh's power to create abundance. It wasn't abstract, it was food on your table.
That makes the ruler's power feel very immediate, doesn't it? Not just some distant god, but the guy who's making sure you don't starve.
Precisely. And this leads to a huge ideological shift you can see in their literature. The pharaoh is no longer this inaccessible god. He's now called the shepherd of his people.
A shepherd. And you mentioned literature, texts that show this concern for social justice.
Yeah, a whole new genre emerges. You have stories like The Tale of the Eloquent Peasant, where a poor man who's been robbed makes these beautiful, eloquent speeches about justice and corruption.
And the king listens.
The king is so impressed, he has the speeches written down. It elevates the idea of fairness for the common person to a state-sanctioned ideal. The king is now being measured by his ability to deliver justice.
Not by the size of his tomb.
Not at all. His primary job is to maintain order, to protect and provide for his people. It's a kingship based on accountability.
And with that internal stability, they started looking outward again.
They did. The economy was booming thanks to all that new agriculture, so they pushed south into Nubia.
Why Nubia?
Gold. Pure and simple. Nubia was the source of the gold that would fund the entire New Kingdom empire to come.
How did they control it?
They built these incredible massive fortresses along the Nile in Nubia at the Second Cataract. They weren't just forts, they were administrative hubs, controlling the flow of gold, ebony, ivory, all of it.
So by about 1650 BC, Egypt is back. It's stable, prosperous, unified.
It's outward-looking. Merchants are going to the Levant, to Mesopotamia. They're back on the world stage.
Which of course means they were perfectly set up for their next collapse.
It's the painful cycle of history, isn't it? Around 1650 BC, the Middle Kingdom falls apart, and we enter the Second Intermediate Period. But this time was different.
How so?
The first collapse was internal. Climate change, famine. This one was external. It was a foreign invasion.
The Hyksos.
The Hyksos, the rulers of foreign lands.
So who were these guys, and how did they break through a newly stabilized Egypt?
Well, the term is Hatshepsut in Egyptian, and they were Semitic peoples from the Levant, modern Syria, Palestine. But the key thing to understand is they didn't just show up one day as a giant conquering army.
Wait, so they were already there?
They were already there. For decades, maybe longer, they'd been migrating into the eastern Nile Delta. It was a rich area. They settled, they worked, they built up a community.
So they didn't conquer a strong kingdom.
They filled a power vacuum. As the central authority of the Middle Kingdom pharaohs started to weaken again, infighting, succession problems, these established leaders in the Delta just took over.
So it's less of an invasion and more of a hostile takeover from within.
That's a great way to put it. They set up their own capital at Avaris in the Delta and ruled Lower Egypt, while the native Egyptian rulers retreated south to Thebes and basically became their vassals.
I can't imagine how humiliating that was for the Egyptians.
It was a theological disaster. To them, they were the center of the universe. To be ruled by these barbarians, it was an existential crisis. Later propaganda paints them as these horrible monsters who destroyed everything.
But that was probably just propaganda, right? To justify kicking them out.
Mostly, yeah. The reality is the Hyksos were actually pretty savvy rulers. They adopted Egyptian customs, they worshipped Egyptian gods alongside their own. They ran a kind of hybrid Egyptian Levantine state.
So what was their real legacy then, if not cultural destruction?
Their legacy was purely military. They brought a technological revolution that changed Egypt forever.
Okay, this is where the game really changes. What does they have that the Egyptians didn't?
3 things, all linked. First, better weapons. True bronze weapons. Bronze is an alloy. It's much harder than the softer copper the Egyptians were using. Sharper swords, better spearheads.
A simple but deadly advantage.
Absolutely. Second, the composite bow. The traditional Egyptian bow was just a curved piece of wood. The composite bow was a high-tech weapon, laminated layers of wood, animal sinew, and horn all glued together.
And that made it, what, more powerful?
Massively more powerful. It stored way more energy. Arrows flew faster, farther, and hit with incredible force. It was a long-range killer.
But the real showstopper had to be the chariot.
The horse-drawn chariot. This is the ancient world's tank. The Egyptians had horses, but they were like exotic pets. The Hyksos turned them into weapons of war.
So you have a fast-moving platform with an archer firing a composite bow.
That slow-moving Egyptian infantry, it was devastating. It was shock and awe, mobility and firepower combined. It made the entire Egyptian way of fighting completely obsolete overnight.
Wow. So the trauma wasn't just being conquered, it was realizing they were technologically helpless.
It was, and they realized they had to change fundamentally. They had to build a whole new military-industrial state just to be able to use these new weapons. You need horse breeding programs, bronze foundries, training.
So the very tools the Hyksos used to conquer Egypt became the tools of their own destruction.
Precisely. The Egyptian princes in Thebes didn't just fight back, they adapted. They learned. Around 1550 BC, Pharaoh Thutmose I launched a war of liberation.
And he used their own weapons against them.
He did. He built his own chariot corps, armed his men with composite bows, and he not only drove the Hyksos out of the Delta,
He pursued them.
he pursued them deep into the Levant. And that is the single most important policy shift in Egyptian history.
Because they decided they could no longer just sit behind their desert borders.
Exactly. Isolation was no longer safe. The new rule was, we will never wait for the enemy to come to us again. We will go to them. We will create buffer zones. We will build an empire.
And that's the birth of the new kingdom. Not just a restoration, But a revolution.
Thutmose's victory kicks off the 18th dynasty and the New Kingdom proper. It's the apex of their power, and it's built on an ideology of aggressive, preemptive security.
So this is the first time Egypt becomes a true conquering empire with a massive standing army. How far did they go?
They pushed out in two directions. South, deep into Nubia, way past the old fortresses. They went all the way to the Fourth Cataract of the Nile.
To secure the gold mines.
That was the bank account. The gold funded everything. And then north into the Levant, where the Hyksos had come from.
The buffer zone.
A massive one. They pushed the frontier all the way to the Euphrates River in modern Syria. At its peak, the empire was just staggering in size.
When you say empire, was this like the Roman Empire with governors and direct rule? Or something else?
It was more of a sphere of influence, but very tightly controlled. They'd leave the local Canaanite kings on their thrones, but as vassals.
Oh, they had to pay up.
They paid heavy tribute every year. Gold, silver, timber, slaves, grain, and they swore loyalty to the pharaoh.
How did they keep these local kings in line?
It was a clever system. They'd bring the sons and daughters of these vassal kings back to Egypt, to the royal court.
As hostages?
High-status hostages, yes. But they were also educated as Egyptians. So you're not only guaranteeing the good behavior of the father, you're also grooming the next generation of rulers to be pro-Egyptian. It's brilliant soft power.
We've talked about security and wealth as motivations. What was the third driver? It had to be an ideological one.
Oh, absolutely. Prestige. War became a ritual. The pharaoh, as the living Horus, had a divine duty to expand the borders of Egypt, to push back chaos. A pharaoh who didn't go on campaign was seen as failing in his most basic job.
And with all that wealth and power pouring into Thebes, we get to the incredible personalities who define this era. Let's start with a ruler who broke every rule, Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut is just a phenomenal figure. She wasn't the first woman to rule Egypt, but she was the first to successfully claim the full title and power of a male pharaoh.
How did she pull that off? I mean, the role of pharaoh was so fundamentally male, wasn't it?
It was a masterclass in political maneuvering and religious propaganda. So her father was a great warrior pharaoh, Thutmose I. She was married to her half-brother, Thutmose II.
Right.
When he died, the heir was a little boy, Thutmose III, who was the son of a secondary wife. So Hatshepsut stepped in as regent, the traditional role for a royal mother.
The temporary caretaker?
Except she wasn't temporary. She very quickly declared herself co-ruler and then full pharaoh. She took all 5 of the royal names. And crucially, her official images show her as a man.
She's depicted with the male headdress, the male body, and the false beard.
And the false beard. The beard wasn't a symbol of gender. It was a symbol of divinity. She was making it clear that she was occupying the office of pharaoh, and the office was male, so she would be depicted that way.
But she still needed a theological justification that nobody could argue with.
And she came up with a brilliant one. The story of her divine birth.
What's that?
She had it carved all over her mortuary temple. The story goes that the god Amun himself came down, disguised as her father, and conceived her with her mother.
Wow. So she's not just the chosen of the gods, she's the literal daughter of the king of the gods.
How can you argue with that? It trumps any political claim her stepson might have.
So what was her reign like? Did she continue the endless wars of her father?
No, her reign was overwhelmingly peaceful and prosperous. She focused on trade and massive building projects.
Like her mortuary temple, Deir el-Bahari.
An absolute architectural masterpiece. It's built in these beautiful colonnaded terraces right into the cliffs. It's stunning.
And she launched that famous trading expedition to Punt.
Yes, the reliefs show her ships coming back from this exotic land, probably modern Somalia, laden with incense, myrrh trees, gold, ivory. It was about bringing the divine bounty of the world back to Egypt, not through war, but through trade.
A very successful 2-decade reign. And yet, after she died, they tried to erase her from history.
They did. About 20 years after her death, a systematic campaign began, statues smashed, her name chiseled out of monument.
Who did it, and why? Was it her stepson, Thutmose III, getting his revenge?
It was almost certainly Thutmose III, but probably not for personal revenge. It was cold, hard political calculation.
How so?
The new kingdom was built on the idea of the male warrior king. A successful, peaceful female pharaoh was a dangerous precedent. By erasing her, he was shoring up the traditional ideology and making sure his own son's succession was secure. It was about reinforcing the system.
And with Hatshepsut gone, Thutmose III could finally become that warrior king. He's called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt.
And he earned it. He ruled for over 50 years and conducted at least 17 major military campaigns. He was on the march in the Levant almost every single year.
17 campaigns. He must have been a brilliant strategist.
He was. And we know it because of the incredible records he left, especially of his first great victory, the Battle of Megiddo.
That's the first battle in history where we have detailed tactical information, right?
Exactly. It's all carved on the walls at Karnak. He's facing this big coalition of Canaanite kings. His generals tell him to take one of two wide, safe roads to attack.
But he doesn't.
He chooses a third option, a narrow, dangerous mountain pass that his own scouts said was too risky for an army to get through.
A huge gamble.
A calculated one. His logic was, if my own generals think it's too dangerous, the enemy will never expect us to come that way.
He used their own assumptions against them.
And it worked perfectly. He marched his army through single file, achieved total surprise, and smashed the enemy coalition. It was a masterpiece of strategy and psychology.
And that set the tone for his entire reign, pushing the empire to its absolute limit.
He took the frontier all the way to the Euphrates River. He professionalized the army. He systematized tribute collection. He created the imperial machine that would run for centuries.
And all that tribute, all that wealth, poured back into Thebes.
Into the treasuries of the god Amun, mostly. Thutmose funded massive building projects, all celebrating Amun, the god who gave him his victories. It created this powerful cycle. Conquest brings wealth, wealth builds temples, and the temples legitimize more conquest.
But that very power structure he reinforced, the immense wealth of the Amun priesthood, was about to be challenged in the most radical way possible.
Yes, by his successor, Amenhotep IV, who we know as Akhenaten.
The heretic king. This is one of the strangest episodes in all of history.
It's a complete left turn. Akhenaten takes this ancient, complex, polytheistic religion with dozens of gods and throws it all away.
For one god.
For one god. The Eight, the physical disk of the sun. He declares all other gods are false. It's a full-blown religious revolution.
I mean, the political consequences of that must have been insane.
Catastrophic. He changes his own name from Amenhotep, which means Amun is satisfied, to Akhenaten, effective for the Aten. Then he closes the temples of all the other gods.
Especially Amun's temples.
He goes right for the throat. He seizes their lands, their wealth. He basically dismantles the most powerful institution in the country overnight.
And to make the break complete, he moves the capital.
He abandons Thebes, the sacred city of Mun, and builds a brand new capital from scratch out in the desert. He calls it Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten. Today it's called Amarna.
The art from this period is so distinctive, so different. The way he's depicted, with the elongated head, the pot belly, it's not the idealized warrior pharaoh at all.
It's a total break with tradition. Some think he had a medical condition, but it's more likely symbolic. He was presenting himself as the sole intermediary to this new god, and this new art style reflected that unique, almost alien status. It's organic and strange, not formal and perfect.
How long did this last? This can't have been popular with the old guard.
It lasted about 17 years, for as long as he was alive. And the moment he died, the backlash was swift and total. The army, the old priesthood, they immediately restored the old gods.
And they abandoned his new city?
Abandoned it to the sand. It was never lived in again. And they tried to erase Akhenaten's name from history even more thoroughly than they had with Hatshepsut. He was just the enemy.
And his successor, his own son, is the one who leads this restoration. The boy king, Tutankhamun.
Exactly. He was born Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten. His advisors quickly had him change it to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun, to signal the return to tradition.
And he was just a kid, right? 9 or 10 when he became pharaoh.
Just a boy. So historically, he's a minor figure. His reign was really run by his powerful advisors who were busy undoing all of his father's radical changes. His actual historical impact is almost zero.
But his fame is off the charts, all because of Howard Carter in 1922.
Because Carter found his tomb, almost completely intact. The tombs of the great pharaohs were all robbed in antiquity. But Tutankhamun was minor, so his tomb was small and easily overlooked. It was buried under rubble from a later tomb.
And what was inside showed the world the sheer reality of New Kingdom wealth.
It was staggering. Over 5,000 objects crammed into these tiny rooms. Gilded chariots, thrones, jewelry, just unbelievable opulence. And remember, this was for a minor king who died at 19.
And the solid gold coffin, the death mask.
The inner coffin alone weighed over 240 pounds, solid gold. And that mask. It has become the face of ancient Egypt. It's the ultimate proof of the incredible wealth that this empire was generating.
Which is the perfect transition to the man who represents the absolute peak of that power, Ramesses II. Ramesses the Great.
If you were to ask an ancient Egyptian to name the greatest pharaoh, they would almost certainly say Ramesses II. He defined the office: longevity, power, and a legacy written in stone.
He reigned for 66 years. That's an incredible amount of time.
A lifetime. And he used it. He had over 100 children, securing the dynasty, and he built on a scale nobody had ever seen before or since. His goal was to make sure his name would last forever.
He was a warrior, too. He's famous for his clash with the other great superpower of the age, the Hittites, the Battle of Kadesh.
Kadesh was the great showdown. Around 1274 BC, Ramesses, still a young man, marched a huge army into Syria to confront the Hittite king.
And he walked right into an ambush.
A perfectly laid trap. Hittite spies fed him false intelligence, and he got way ahead of the rest of his army. Suddenly, he's surrounded by thousands of Hittite chariots with just his personal bodyguard.
And the Egyptian version of this story is that he personally fought his way out, like a superhero.
It's incredible propaganda, carved on all his temples. Ramesses single-handedly smashing the enemy. The reality is that he managed to hold on just barely until his reinforcements arrived and fought the battle to a bloody draw.
So, not the stunning victory he claimed.
Not at all, but what came out of it was even more important. After the battle, both sides realized they couldn't destroy each other.
So they made a deal.
A few years later, they signed the world's first known comprehensive peace treaty. We have copies from both the Egyptian and the Hittite side. It's a landmark of ancient diplomacy. Ramesses was a realist.
But he's best known as a builder. He put his name on everything.
Everywhere. He built a new capital in the Delta, Pi-Ramesses, to be closer to the empire in Asia. He built the incredible rock-cut temples at Abu Simbel.
The 4 giant statues of himself.
Each one over 60 feet tall. A message of power to anyone coming up from the south. He massively expanded the hypostyle hall at Karnak, that forest of giant columns. He built his own mortuary temple. He even put his own name on the statues of earlier kings.
He literally wrote himself over the landscape of Egypt.
And it worked. Centuries later, when the Greeks and Romans came, it was Ramesses' monuments they saw everywhere. And amazingly, his actual mummy survived. We can look at the face of the man who ruled at the absolute zenith of Egyptian power.
So the new kingdom, from the expulsion of the Hyksos to the reign of Ramesses the Great, is Egypt at its absolute peak. Powerful, wealthy, confident.
It's an era of mastery. They are masters of their world, exporting their culture and importing incredible riches. It's built on the pragmatic foundations of the Middle Kingdom and galvanized by the shock of that Hyksos invasion.
But all golden ages come to an end. Even an empire this powerful can't last forever.
No, it can't. And after Ramesses, the cracks really start to show. There are new threats from the outside, the mysterious sea peoples and growing internal fractures.
A long, slow decline.
A long decline that will eventually lead to Egypt being ruled by a succession of foreign powers: Libyans, Nubians, Persians.
Which is what we'll be covering in Part 3. The story of how this fiercely independent civilization learns to survive when it's no longer master of its own house.
It's a story of resilience, but a different kind. How a culture holds on to its identity, its soul, when it loses its political sovereignty.
It really makes you think. We've seen how they handled internal collapse and external invasion. But the next challenge is completely different. How does a culture survive when the pharaoh sitting on the throne is no longer Egyptian? That's the question we'll take on next time.